Welcome to another episode of Positive Solutions for Life. This is Peggy Meyer. Today's guest is Dr. Karen Parker. Karen is a global integrative wellness expert and creator of quantum human design, a system that blends ancient human design with modern science. Her recently released book, Quantum Wellness Healing Your Mind, Body, and Spirit with Human Design, provides a science backed, spiritually grounded guide for healing mind, body, and spirit. With over 30 years of experience in integrative medicine, energy psychology, and human potential research, Karen explores how our personal narratives shape biology and behavior. Her work draws from quantum physics, neuroscience, and empowerment to help people understand their body's signals, address imbalances, and shift from survival to thriving. So, welcome to the podcast, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm excited for our conversation. I have recently, over the years, gotten really interested in neuroscience and this quantum physics stuff, and just really obviously been in this podcast for 2 years plus, just really trying to figure out how we can improve our lives. So, before we dive into the conversation, can you start by sharing just a little bit more about you, your personal journey, and how it has led to where you are today?
Yeah, I can. I always have to think, where am I going to start? Because I've been
Yeah, I
here.
know. That's a hard
Um,
question for a lot of people. It's like, ah, how far back do we want to go?
so yeah, I think in the name of giving just sort of a big overview, I started off my journey as a nurse and didn't last very long as a nurse because I don't take orders very well. But I very quickly started my own home birth midwifery practice. And one of the things I really started to notice while working as a midwife is that I could almost always predict who was going to have birth complications and who wasn't. And I want to be really clear. Whatever we talk about today, I don't want to sew us into a really tight package and say your thoughts create your reality, because I do think it's a little bit more complex than that. And I
Mhm.
certainly don't want anybody to blame themselves or beat themselves up if they haven't had optimal experiences in life, because life has mystery associated
Yes,
with it too. We have
yes.
to embrace the mystery too. And in my home birth practice, I could really sort of predict who was going to have challenges and who wasn't. And a lot of it had to do with the story they were telling about
Mhm.
themselves, whether they were supported or not. And it got my attention. And I didn't stay as a midwife for very long because I had kids, and that was a career that was really hard to balance with family. But I did go on to train to become a life coach and an energy psychologist practitioner, and ultimately even learned human design. And what I started to see in my coaching practice was that that same phenomenon was playing out with my coaching clients. So
Mhm.
I could hear in people's stories what was going on, what was sort of the subtext underneath why they were struggling with money, why they were challenged with relationships, why maybe they were struggling with health and wellness, why they were having challenges with career. And that continued to really become maybe an obsession on my in my part. Like, how do we, as any kind of helping professional or practitioner, how do we start analyzing and assessing people's stories in a way that's systematic, consistent, and duplicable?
Mhm.
So around 2000, I sort of accidentally stumbled upon human design, and that is a whole nother story in and of itself. And I got the opportunity to work for and train with the founder of the system, Ra Uru. And I loved it. And I loved it part and parcel because I could see how it was a really useful way to start looking at the stories people were telling about who they are and how to start taking that story apart and rewriting it intentionally. Human design is a system that integrates Eastern and Western astrology, the Chinese I Ching, Hindu chakra system, Judaic Kabbalah, and quantum physics. Really, what it is kind of a mishmash
Mhm.
of ancient and modern archetypes. And archetypes are really just parts of a story.
Mhm.
And so I kind of fell in love with this tool because I started to apply it in my coaching practice with my clients. And it was kind of bad for business because I got really good at very quickly going, oh, I know what the problem is. And we really, I started to be able to shave months off of my coaching practice, off of my
Yeah.
coaching contracts, because we really were able to, using human design, get to the heart of where people were feeling or experiencing blocks, stuckness, and really limiting themselves.
Hmm.
When I worked for traditional human design, when I worked for Human Design America, one of the things that the founder was always saying was that one day he was going to rewrite the system as it existed to take it to the next level.
Hmm.
The traditional human design, as he taught it, is a tool, is a healing tool that really helps you first and foremost make better decisions. Really, that's probably a good summary of it. And if you think about where we are in our lives right now, we are where we are because of the sum total of every decision that we've made. And if we
Hmm.
want something different, we have to start choosing better.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things he said was eventually he was going to write a version of the system that went beyond restoring yourself back to your baseline and really gave you vocabulary to help you define your optimized self.
Mm. Yeah.
Unfortunately, he passed in 2011 and never got to complete that work. And it really, for me, that vision of a different version of human design that took it to one step further
Mhm.
just kept haunting me for several years. And finally, in 2013, I took human design, all the vocabulary of traditional human design, into a sound lab and began exploring different words. I actually had a big giant Rodell's thesaurus that I took with me and explored what would be better ways, more high frequency, literally high frequency ways
Mhm.
to articulate some of these archetypes, and how can we take these stories that we're telling with traditional human design and expand on them to give people a new narrative, a new story to grow into. And that was
Mhm.
sort of the birth of what I call quantum human design. And from that place, I started to do research on using narrative psychology and intentional storytelling as a tool to help people begin to rewrite and decode and recode their core personal story.
What I'm hearing is a lot of this is energy. And so the words we use, the things that we do, and you went to a sound lab and you're all the words have energy and they're lower frequency, higher frequency. How how do you get people to understand or recognize the words and how the stories that they tell themselves and how they can do it, like upgrade it to a higher frequency?
So I think first you have to start with exploring what is the current story that you're telling. Because I would say there's several phases in that process. And the first phase is really recognizing what is the story that I'm currently telling and where did that story come from. So it's easy when we start talking about things like energy and to get really complicated, but
Mhm.
it's actually it can be really simple. So here's something to think about. We all have a couple of what I'll call core metaphors in our personal story. And the brain, which is a brilliant organ, but an organ that is really kind of a storytelling organ, it actually
Mhm.
interprets the world through the lens of storytelling. Your brain is telling a story, and that story is really being encoded in everything you do in your life. And my dad used to say, "How you do anything is how you do everything," and really, it's kind of true. Your story is going to embed itself or express itself through every layer of your life. So one of the things that I often have people do is I'll ask them, "How do you eat dinner?" And I'm not talking about like what diet do you follow? Because
Right, right.
in my community, people start saying, "Well, I'm paleo," and I'm like, "No, no, no, not with diet, but actually, how do you eat dinner?" And think about that for a minute.
Mhm.
Dinner, metaphorically, is a place in our day, is part of our daily practice, where we are sitting down, hopefully, we're receiving nourishment, we are committing some kind of an act if we're cooking to nourish ourselves. We
Mhm.
are connecting oftentimes intimately with the people we love. It becomes a
Mhm.
place of communion, companionship, support. Dinner is a metaphor, right?
Mhm.
And when people tell me how they eat dinner, I can almost instantly know without looking at anything, oh, I get what your core metaphor is, because dinner becomes the embodiment of how much goodness are you willing to receive? What kind of care are you taking for yourself? Do you value yourself enough to set a plate with the good china? Are you in community with others, or are you eating alone in front of the TV? Are you sitting down. I said that deliberately because so many of my clients don't sit down for dinner. I even had one client that literally didn't even have a dining room table and was just eating standing up in her kitchen, which, I told her the first thing I did is you got to go out and get yourself a kitchen table because you got to sit down and you got to have dinner in an intentional way.
Yeah.
And it's not about dinner, right? It's about the story. It's
Mhm.
about all of the embodiment of that story that's happening. And so we want to make it complicated, but I would say the easiest thing to do is to ask yourself, what's my relationship with money? What's my relationship with people, the people in my life? What's my relationship with my work? What's my relationship like with my body? And what's my spiritual relationship with like? And if you are not optimizing, if you're not having a good relationship in any of those key areas of your life, you're not screwed up and you're not failing. It probably just means that there's some element in your core story that you need to upgrade to allow yourself to begin to experience more. Why? Why is this important? Well, the brain thinks in stories, as I said,
Mhm.
and the brain is also a weirdly efficient organ, right? The brain is always looking for where's the shortcut and the pattern.
Mhm.
And how can I integrate the shortcut and the pattern so that I don't have to overthink? And the brain has a really finite capacity for processing data. Right now, as any of you who are listening are sitting in, listening to this, you're sitting in a field of information, and most of it you're oblivious to because your brain can only process a certain amount of data per minute. And so our stories actually help code the brain to notice patterns that match our stories because the brain can't seek out all the other options. When you start changing your story, you actually start recoding what the brain is paying attention to. And all of a sudden, that field of information that you've been sitting in reveals something else to you. And so it's not so much you change your story, poof, magic happens and new things drop in. They're there already, but we don't see them because we haven't coded our brain to see them with a story. When we give it a better story, we start recoding the way the brain processes the data, then we start to see things differently and reframe our perspective and see more opportunities and different ways of creating.
And then we can change our focus then,
Mm-hmm.
by those things that come in, we're kind of, shifting it a little bit of what we're focusing on, and then that can change into something a little bit more, hopefully better, as our attention goes to it. And then it's just like, wow, okay. So can you give an example of how somebody can like tweak maybe wellness um for themselves?
Well, that's a really great question because, first we'll take it down to a very mundane definition of wellness. Oftentimes when we talk about wellness, we're talking about, doing all the good habits that you need to take
Mhm.
to stay healthy, right? That's kind of our more normal definition of wellness. And I was again encourage people think about if you have kids, when your kids need a vitamin, or are you're gonna give your kids their vitamin every day, right? You're not gonna forget to give your kids their vitamin. But how many times do we forget our own, right?
Mhm.
How many times do we not do the things that we are willing to do for someone else? At the root of making choices that support wellness is your connection to yourself, and most importantly your self-worth and your
Mhm.
sense of lovability. And oftentimes we neglect the things that we need to do to stay well because we don't believe we deserve them, or we have some narrative that embodies that to some degree, especially for women,
Mhm.
right? Or and let me just be clear, putting off taking care of yourself until everybody else has been taken care of first is an embodiment of
Mhm.
a value issue, right? it's
Mhm.
it's an embodiment of a value story that, I mean, I'm a mom, I have 8 kids, I have two aging parents. I mean, sometimes it is absolutely true.
Yeah.
You just got to do what you got to do because somebody needs something more than you do in that moment. But
Mhm.
overall, as a
Right.
theme, right, you can't take care of the people you need to take care of if you yourself are not sustained.
Yeah.
And yet we tend to put that off.
Mhm.
We put it off because our underlying narrative says, I don't deserve to be well. I don't deserve to take care of myself. Everybody else is more important than me. I get
Mhm.
my value from martyrdom.
Mhm.
I hate to use that
Mhm.
word, but I get my value from being a martyr for my family, my people, my whatever. Right. And so, in order for us to really optimize wellness and wellness habits, we have to have a story underneath that supports our being able to follow through on the habits that
Mhm.
we know we need to take.
Yeah. That's so key because the, a lot of, I think, women moms, we will do whatever it takes to take care of everybody else.
Mhm.
But really, if we're not taking care of ourselves first, how can we be very good at taking care of others? And I could just imagine the energy, if I'm not feeling very well, how is that, transposed to somebody else?
Mhm. Totally. Well, and it's not just only transposed to everyone else, it also eventually takes its toll on the body
Hmm.
because you can't sustain that level of giving without restocking, replenishing, and recharging yourself first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it'll take, its toll in other areas of your life as well. When we neglect to take care of ourselves, or when we neglect our self-worth and our lovability,
Hmm.
it creates obstacles to us creating fulfillment in every area of our life, even beyond having children.
Hmm. Yeah. So, why is it so hard for people to sustain good wellness practices for themselves? Or even to make lasting change? Because it seems like in this day and age, everybody's just like cycling through, trying this, trying that, it's just not, you know, being sustained, I guess.
Well, so I would say part of why we have difficulty staying sustainable, and maybe we even take it out of the context of a wellness
Okay.
practice, because
Yeah.
because you know I think that it goes beyond just a traditional wellness practice. We struggle to sustain ourselves because we're not holding stories that hold our resilience.
Mm,
We are oftentimes spending our energy trying to fulfill expectations from our families, from society. We're following formulas about this is what we should do. This is, these are the formulas for success. We're trying to be something that we're not. And
mm,
when we're trying to be something that we're not, we actually spend an enormous amount of energy sustaining
mhm,
the mask. And when
mhm.
we sustain that mask, when we're trying, when you say yes, when you want to say no, when you say no, when you want to say yes,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you're, going through the motions, during the day,
Mhm,
of trying to do something that the world has told you you should do that you hate, but you
mhm.
feel compelled to do it because that's just what you do.
Right.
That mask is exhausting. Think about it like
Yeah.
this. If you go to one of those masquerade parties where you're holding up those masks, like those little romantic masquerade parties,
Yeah.
right? You don't hold that mask up all night, because at a certain point in time, not too far into it, maybe after one margarita, you're not able to hold that mask up and it feels really heavy. You're going to get a
Mhm.
kink in your shoulder,
Right.
and it isn't that heavy, right? It's
Right.
not really that big a deal to hold it up, but if you're holding it up over time, it does take
Hmm.
energy. And our
Hmm.
lives are very much like that. Most of us are holding up some kind of a mask, and
Hmm.
we have to put an enormous amount of energy into keeping that mask in front of our face, and that eventually wears us down and burns us out.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you help kind of, expand this human design to elevate it to the next level? And how do people can get a hold of that, I guess? And what do they do with it?
So, if you're telling a story that doesn't include your self-worth or your value or your lovability or your self-trust or your courage or whatever it might be,
Hmm.
and it's showing up in areas of your life that might be causing you pain, like it's showing up in your money or your relationships. And there's something in your story, there's something in your mindset, there's something in whatever language we're using that is keeping you back. It's very hard to figure out what that is,
Hmm.
right? If I say change your mindset, change your money mindset, it's like great, that's a wonderful idea. I can start shifting and affirming and using better language and writing down my affirmations or whatever, but it doesn't really address the core story underneath. And one of the things that I really was grappling with and eventually really began to codify was finding a systematic approach to start taking your current story apart so that
Hmm.
you could explore where in my story are there weak spots, and then starting to use quantum human design, this expanded language, as a tool to start rewriting your narrative. That systematic approach really allowed us to begin exploring what meanings are you holding, and what meanings need to be rewritten and recoded.
Mhm.
So the human design chart, which, as I said, is a collection of all these ancient and modern
Yeah.
archetypes, can be really, really complex. I know you ran your chart, you
Mhm.
know, you've seen it. It's not, it can be really complex, but it's also can be elegant and simple.
Mhm.
What human design does is it gives us a lot of information about your story. So, for example, in traditional human design, there are 5 energy types. Each one of those energy types has a different life purpose. They have a different path. They use energy differently. They're here to work differently.
Mhm.
And when you understand your type that you're born into, that gives us a lot of information about the main character in your story, right? What are you here to do?
Mhm.
What adventures are you here to go on? If you think about storytelling, particularly if you start looking at storytelling through the lens of what we usually use traditionally, the hero's journey, you know,
Mhm.
in the hero's journey, you've got a character, a main character that
Mhm.
starts off in the beginning of their story, and they're usually not in a great place. They usually have some kind of core personality trait that's problematic, right? They're a know-it-all, or they're a little bit impulsive, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And through some kind of adventure or challenge, they have to confront that part of themselves. They have to get eyeball to eyeball with themselves in front of the mirror. And they have to figure out, how am I going to work with this part of who I am so that it's no longer a sacred flaw in my personality, but it becomes the path for me to catalyze my wisdom and my maturity. And once they go through that quest, right, the hero
Mhm.
then returns back to their people and does great things in their community.
Right.
So in human design, when we break the chart down, it really helps us look at the parts in that hero's journey. So the type is your main character. There's if you look at your chart, you'll see there's like a little fraction on your chart that's called the
Mhm.
profile. The profile tells us a lot about personality traits of the main character. Then when you look at the human design chart, you'll see it has 9 geometric shapes on it.
Mhm.
Those geometric shapes represent how you process energy. And oftentimes we get confused about how we're experiencing energy. And that confusion oftentimes creates drama in our life. So for example, if you have a chart where you receive emotional energy from others, you're an emotional empath. Sometimes that causes us to adopt lifestyle habits where we feel responsible for keeping everybody else happy. We become people pleasers. We avoid truth and consequences. We don't ask for what we need and want because we don't want to be a burden, right? So we look at those patterns and how those patterns can be sort of the sacred flaw that our main character has to explore and ultimately grow through. In the next level of analysis in the chart, there's all kinds of lines in the chart that connect different parts. They're like circuit. It's really literally like
Yeah.
circuitry in the chart, or like you would have circuitry in your bathroom or your kitchen. These
Right.
are aggregates of archetypal themes that hang out together. And these also represent your sacred flaw, things you need to work with and grow through, themes that you'll be dealing with over the course of your whole life. And when you start to understand, oh, this is a quality that is part of the energy that catalyzes my growth, and every time I go through a growth cycle, I'm going to hit this theme.
Mm. Yeah.
You start to learn, okay, this is my theme. This is my growth theme. Cool. I'm hitting this. And you start to see, okay, my life is this story and I have all these core challenges. When you go back out into your real life, now through the lens of storytelling, you start to see, okay, here's me. I'm the main character. I'm encountering my empathy, which can be a
Mhm.
great gift or sometimes a challenge. What do I need to do in this intense emotional moment to set a good boundary, stay emotionally regulated, speak my truth, and not be
Mhm.
afraid of the repercussions? How do I need to hold everybody else accountable for keeping themselves happy so that I'm not taking on something that's not mine to
Yeah.
take on? And then how do I use that understanding, that empathetic understanding that I have, to become a resource for the people I love?
Yeah. So it's really taking some of the things that is naturally you and like shining some light on it, but then also realizing that it's not all bad. Like,
Right.
okay, this is just who you are. You're going to run into this. Like, this is how you normally try to respond to things. So this is going to be a hiccup that you're going to have to grow through. Like,
Mhm.
take it and embrace it and see it when it's coming because you don't have to run from it. Like,
Right,
embrace
exactly.
it. Because if that's who you are and that's how you respond, gain energy, receive energy, lose energy, once we're aware of that, it helps us to make better decisions.
Yes, exactly. And I'll add one other point that human design brings us. The very first this is the easy part of human design, is that every one of those five types, excuse me, has a different way of making decisions.
Mhm.
And that the purpose of reconnecting with your natural way of making choices is part of getting us back into the body
Mhm.
and checking in and feeling and sensing, does this feel right for me or
Mhm.
not? Because
Mhm.
most of us are really checked out from our body. We've had
Yeah.
to learn to numb our inner intuition, our gut level
Mhm.
awareness of what's right and wrong for us. And part of what we have to do to start healing and to be, to get that courage to take that mask down
Mhm.
is we have to know, okay, if I take the mask down and I'm vulnerable and I'm
Mhm.
revealing myself to the world, how do I then, from that vulnerable and open place, begin to make effective choices that are right for me, that maybe even defy some of the rules and the formulas I've been
Mhm.
told I need to
Mhm.
follow to be successful in life?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry if I'm changing this, but my brain is going right now is like, okay, I can kind of understand where I'm at. But
Hmm.
like if I've, my kids,
Hmm.
like, is there a way for us to understand what our kids is, profile type design is so that we can better interact with them or the
Hmm.
people that we love? Like, is that
Totally.
something?
I
Like,
mean, I mean, I teach a couple of relationship coach training programs, including a family coach training program, because it is such a powerful tool.
mhm,
I surveyed my subscribers a couple of years ago, and I said, what was the greatest benefit that you got from learning your human design? And I fully expected people to write things like, oh, I made more money, or I have better success, or I
mhm,
feel more confident. And hands down, the number one response was, I learned a lot about myself, but I really learned a lot about my children, my parents, my father, my husband, my wife,
mhm,
because it is such a great way to reframe our understanding of our loved ones,
mhm.
and to really start using it as a tool, not to change the people we love, because we don't really want to change the people we
Yeah.
love, but to better meet them where they're at, to treat them respectfully, to communicate with them effectively, to understand what drives them, especially
Yeah.
when you have kids, right?
Yeah.
My youngest, I have 8 children. My youngest is 16. And my older kids are all like in their late 20s, early 30s. Um, and she's really my first child that I have raised 100% according to her
Mhm.
design. The others, I came kind of late to the game with them.
Yeah.
And it's been really incredible to create an environment in our house that I think genuinely stewards this child, and
Mhm.
to watch her in an environment where we understand her energetic dynamics, where she's allowed to really unfold into her natural self, and to watch how much her natural connection to her self-trust has been kept in place,
Mhm.
because I've been able, we've really been able to see her for who she
Mhm.
is and for how she is.
Yeah.
So for example, she's an energy type that doesn't have sustainable energy. She has cycles in her energy. Now she's 16. She's very active. She's a drama kid. She's on a horseback riding team. I mean, she doesn't have a quiet life, but she also runs out of energy. And she has just learned through her own exploration, and I think through support from her dad and me,
Mhm.
that she needs a day off once a week, because if she doesn't take and when I say day off, I mean, like, she has Saturdays are her days off, and she does not
Mhm.
get out of her pajamas, and she stays in bed, and she, I guess what she calls it, bed rotting, which I hate that word, but she's like, I bed rot on Saturdays, it's crucial for her. She
Mhm.
absolutely has to do that, because that gives her the restoration
Mhm.
that she needs to be able to go back out into her life.
Yeah.
And I think, what would it be like if we all understood these key elements about each other, and we could create those supportive spaces and not judge? When we first, when I first started introducing these ideas to her dad, who wasn't familiar with human design when we first got married, he was like, "Why is she just staying in her room all day?" And I said, "Well, because she needs to rest. And that just like blew his mind. It took me so long to train him to be like, it's okay. It's okay for her to rest. And actually, it's also okay for you, but you won't. So, but really just even, rewriting the narrative that
Right.
society tells us about something as simple as taking a day off and resting, which, interestingly enough, is encoded into most of our religious teachings, right?
Yes,
We have some,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. And we fail to just, honor that.
right, right.
But because we have so many, societal things, we can go in through a whole nother conversation about how we just
Right.
gotta go, 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 go. But I want like if the listeners are like, oh wow, this is really cool, like I do, like I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to like I'm one of those that love to gather more information. Where can they find out more about this quantum human design and the programs that you offer? Where can they find that?
So if you go to our website, it's quantumhumandesign.com. When you go to that website, you'll have the opportunity if you want to run your own chart that pops up. It's so you can get your
Hmm.
chart. It comes with a little report. We've got all kinds of course options if you want to learn more about your personal chart. We have professional trainings and certifications. We have integrative health programs for professionals to help them integrate human design into their health practices. You can find my books. It's Dr. Karen Parker. If you look up my name on Amazon or Barnes& and Noble, any online retail outlet,
Hmm.
you can
Hmm.
find all kinds of books about human design, including my new book, which is called Quantum Wellness, which is, I think, is a very systematic, easy to understand way to sort of take your chart apart.
Hmm.
If you get your chart and you want to learn more, it's a great way to start. On our Quantum Human Design website, you can find all kinds of practitioners who do readings. And you can find us on Instagram and Facebook, Dr. Karen Parker 22, or on YouTube, Dr. Karen Parker.
Awesome, awesome. I'll put some of that stuff in the show notes so people can easily just click on that and find you. But oh my gosh, what an amazing conversation today. There's so many more things that we could dive into because the stories we tell ourselves are one thing, but for understanding the energy and how other people can, once we understand this, other people, how we interact with other people. Because I'm just like thinking, you have a kid that needs rest. I have one that the more busy she is, like the better she gets. And I remember a time where she was doing club basketball and club volleyball and all of this and traveling and all of this. And I was just like, oh, I like took 1 week out of the summer and just like, I think you need a break because I'm like one of those that like I need a break. Yeah, the next week wasn't so hot. The coaches were wondering what the heck did she do? And I'm like, I gave her a break because I thought she needed one, but okay, like don't do that again.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's just different. Just because we might need that doesn't mean somebody else needs that.
exactly,
And so
exactly.
that's just reverse. Like if somebody needs, maybe we don't need a day of rest, like we should because we need to, but like your daughter
Hmm.
needs a specific amount of rest and a lot of us do need a recharge. We just
Right,
won't
right,
admit it.
right. Well, and again, we're all different, and I think
Yes.
that's part of, to me, the beauty of human design is it helps you explore who you are, how you are, and how to really live true to what you need in spite of what others around you might need or not need.
Right. Just that personal responsibility and ownership of ourselves. So that's as we wrap up today, is there anything that you have left unsaid that you feel like the listeners need to hear, or anything that you just want to leave them with?
I would just say go go figure out how you eat dinner and pay attention to your
Mm,
core narrative. If that core narrative is anything less than I deserve to have a beautiful beautiful meal every day, and there's anything in you that's stopping you from allowing yourself to receive all the beauty you deserve, go tell a better story because you deserve a better story and do it
yes.
fast.
Yes. We all deserve a better story. So take a look, be aware. It starts with an awareness of what the story is that you're telling yourself now, and then look for ways to improve it and go check out quantumhumandesign.com and get more information on how this all can affect you and those around you. So thank you for joining me today, Karen. It's
Thank
been
you for
such
having
a
me.
pleasure. This is such a short amount of time to get a whole bunch of good stuff in.
Thank you.